There she is. It's always the start to every good Zoom call these days. Hi, everybody. It's Katie from GFAN, and thanks, Tara, for getting us all on today and doing the technical stuff. I'm going to attempt to move through my own slideshow, which is really, really short. But I hope everybody enjoys the title for today's call, which is a bit tongue-in-cheek. But just in case you were kind of like some of us, it seems like this replenishment in particular has taken us a little bit by surprise. But I guess we also all knew that it was coming. So really delighted to have Francoise and Diane from the Global Fund Secretariat join us today, along with Pauline and Linda, who are, allies and partners in most of our conversations. And just the agenda for today is really quite simple. I'm going to just start off with a quick little overview from sort of our perspective in terms of GFAN, our approach during a replenishment, and then a much longer and probably more interesting presentation from the Global Fund Secretariat with their sort of look ahead to what replenishment is looking like from this stage, and then lots of opportunity for questions and answers. And then reminders and announcements at the end of the call. And I would just really encourage all of you to think through, as we're going through those presentations, what kind of questions or comments that you might have, because I think this is traditionally maybe a conversation that some of us or many of us would have had in person a few months ago already, and we would already be starting down this path and have had many conversations around it. And I know myself and a number of you have already been having conversations with the Secretariat, but thought that today would be a good opportunity, with the recent sort of 20th anniversary launch for the Global Fund celebration and how that sort of dovetails into replenishment work. I thought it would be a good opportunity just to get together, cover the basics together, have an opportunity to ask sort of our questions, make our comments at this stage, so that we're all thinking that through over the next couple of months, where many of us, including I assume many from the Secretariat, but also from our side at GFAN, will be taking holidays, throughout the summer. And so we come back in September where we are sort of, hopefully some of us are rested, and we have been put our thinking caps on and are able to get started on replenishment. So that's the purpose for today's call. So just encourage you all to really think through any questions or comments that you do have, and just save them for the end after myself and Diane and Francoise have presented from the Secretariat. So I'm not going to go through this entire slide, but for those of you who've not yet been through a replenishment, there are sort of 4 key components that the work is most often structured around, and that you're going to hear a lot of on today's call: the investment case, the preparatory meeting, the pledging or replenishment conference, and converting pledges to contributions after they've been made. I just put these descriptions and general timings here. It'll be in the slideshow that we always upload to our website after the call with the recording, so you'll be able to come back to this if this is your first replenishment, or if you need a little reminder about what sort of each of these things are. The investment case, which is produced by the Global Fund Secretariat with input from its technical partners, is exactly what it sounds like. It's the narrative of why countries should invest in the Global Fund, and that's often launched at the preparatory meeting or in the lead up to it, which was hosted by an implementing country government during the 6th replenishment for the first time. And I think many of us hope that that may be possible again this time for the 7th. And then the pledging or replenishment conference is sort of the culmination of all of this work, where countries formally pledge or announce contributions, although at least for the last 2, many countries did make sort of early pledges, but they sort of repledge them formally at the event. So throughout all of this and across these sort of key moments, as communities and civil society, we kind of build up the drumbeat of support globally, regionally, and most importantly, nationally. So as GFAN, I guess what I wanted to say is that we're never going to be able, you're over 700 members in over 90 countries. We're never going to be able to hand you a package and say, there you go, here's absolutely everything that you need to go off and do your advocacy. But instead, what we hope to do is through this platform, these calls, our website, that we are able to help you get some of the pieces, some of the building blocks for your advocacy campaigns, and to feedback to us about those kinds of things that are helpful and useful to you in your advocacy as we move through and closer to the pledging conference. So these kinds of GFAN calls, for example, come the fall, will become more regular. We will put sort of placeholders in your calendars for bi-weekly calls where we will try to connect on various processes and events, and on a regular basis, but not necessarily every time, also hear from the Global Fund Secretariat or other sort of key partners like the Stop TB Partnership or Roll Back Malaria or UNAIDS around various pieces and parts of the replenishment campaign and how we can put that together so that we're sharing information, sharing intelligence, and how best to use the various opportunities that we all use to sort of build that drumbeat of support. And again, we do try to create tools for you, and no one tool is going to be perfect for everyone. But we do hope that through sort of building a variety of different tools and try to meet you where your advocacy is. So either support you in terms of just grabbing a letter when you need it that helps you start advocacy with your government, or where you have some key messages that you can build on from based on your years of experience advocating to your government and supporting some of those macro level themes, but also, inputting your own sort of domestic and national messages. So that's what we hope to do. And this is just a quick look ahead between now and the end of this year and into next year in terms of the kinds of things that I said that we would be beginning to ramp up come September. So again, our calls will resume on a regular basis. We're building a thought leaders series of calls where we will define sort of topics such as how we address the challenges of shrinking ODA budgets and how we manage that in an era of COVID and possibly restricting, or shrinking fiscal space, both for implementing countries and donor countries. And so we will have a series of these calls to explore those kinds of topics together, calling very much on all of you for the expertise that many of you bring to these conversations in various spaces, and explore those topics together through virtual meetings. We do hope to have a virtual GFAN strategy meeting in mid to late October. We're going to try and avoid things like Canadian Thanksgiving, the G20 and the lead up to it, the World Bank meetings, and just try and position ourselves in that timing so that we can get the best, so we can get your best thinking heads together as we build towards 2022 and the real push towards replenishment. But some of the more immediate work, and one of the reasons I'm really glad that we're having this call today, and for us it's really useful to have it today, is that we're hoping that some of you will join us in a really short-term kind of working group informally, so that we have a touch point over the next couple of months as we build out a community and civil society ask for the Global Fund. We hope to be in a place where, similar to the last replenishment, where we published the Get Back on Track report and its ask of the world and of the Global Fund in terms of investment for the 6th replenishment. We hope to be able to publish something similar, but probably quite a bit shorter and maybe a bit pithier for end of September or into early October. So our goal with that is to have a number of you just sort of touching base with us, answering surveys, looking at first drafts of the report. And of course, by many of you, I do mean our colleagues in civil society and communities, and this wouldn't be something that we would be coordinating closely with the Secretariat on, although we hope that, of course, we remain aligned throughout the process. So that's going to be something key that we're going to be trying to move forward over the, well, I call it summer, but through June into September, so that we're well placed in the fall as various events resume and various conversations sort of amp up, that we're able to speak with a authoritative voice about what we believe is necessary in terms of investments for the Global Fund at the 7th replenishment. So that's really my quick overview. Again, these slides with a little bit more detail will be up on our website, but I hope that just sort of helps to give you a perspective from our side as GFAN in terms of what we hope to be able to do and what our purpose and objective is with all of you and how we hope to be able to support you. And just to highlight that there will be, more calls, they will be more regular, and we hope that you'll be able to join those regularly so that you can participate in the discussions and the conversations and the strategizing as we move forward. So that's really all that I wanted to be able to cover right now. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I'm going to pass it over to Françoise Vanny from the Global Fund, I think, to kick us off. And I think it's Françoise and Diane Stewart who are going to be sharing with us a very pretty PowerPoint with the new with the new design elements for the fund. So Francoise, I don't think you need an introduction as the Director of External Relations and Communications, but welcome. Nice to see you again. And please pass it over to you now and Diane, and then we will return back to the group for questions and answers.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you everyone for joining the call and for this conversation. I very much look forward to it. Indeed, it feels like the replenishment is coming very fast at us, but it also feels that it's coming at us in a very challenging and unprecedented context. So what we are going to talk you through today, and probably will go perhaps fast over some slides to make sure we have some time for the conversation. We will talk you through the key building blocks, and perhaps you can go to the next slide, Tara, please. So obviously, we are going to run the replenishment campaign at the back of a new strategy, right? So I'll talk you briefly about the strategy development process, actually the key milestones was achieved yesterday in that context. So we'll talk a little bit about that, how it's looking like. It's also an unprecedented context in terms of the C-19 crisis and the global fund response to it. So that obviously has implications in terms of how we position ourselves for the 7th replenishment. It's at the time where we are celebrating or marking, should I say, our 20th anniversary, celebrating the impact achieved, but also looking ahead in terms of the challenges and obviously preparing for the 7th replenishment itself. So all of those elements are building blocks for a successful 7th replenishment campaign. So I'll talk briefly through the three first elements, and then I'll hand over to Diane to talk you through the 7th replenishment planning and actual preparations that we have started. I hope everybody can see the slides. I can see it very well from where I sit, but I hope it's the case for colleagues. So let's go to next slide, please. So starting with the strategy development, next slide, please. So obviously super important because we need to plan ahead for the 7th replenishment, while at the same time being super mindful of the fact that the strategy is in the making. So in that sense, it's different from last time, where we did have the strategy and we had a sort of investment case built on that strategy that we already knew because we were in the second period of it, while this time around we start with a new strategy. So we've been making, as a partnership, a lot of progress in terms of the strategy development with a lot of inputs from a very wide and inclusive consultation over the last few months, a lot of evidence and information gathering, and critically partnership forums that happened in the first quarter of this year. And at this moment, this is really the time where the strategy framework is being developed and endorsed by the strategy committee and therefore and afterwards the board of the Global Fund. So I was referring to a key milestone because indeed yesterday the strategy committee endorsed that strategy framework that will now go to the board for their approval, hopefully in July. And after that, we will be developing a much fuller, more comprehensive narrative over the subsequent months for that final strategy document to be approved in November. And obviously by the end of the year, we will be kicking off very much our replenishment campaign. So you see it's quite tight. So how does the strategy look like so far? Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is really hot from the press, if I may say so. So that's the framework or a summary of the framework, because obviously it comes with all sorts of explanations and details alongside it. But that gives you, I guess, the essence of it. One very important element is obviously that the primary goal of the Global Fund remains to end AIDS, TB, and malaria. So that's very, very clear and a very strong consensus across the partnership that we are working with and to serve the health needs of people and communities. So very, very much this idea that people and communities are at the very center of what we do and how we do it. You can see underneath what have been called contributory objectives, meaning how is it that we are going to end AIDS, TB, and malaria? So through people-centered integrated system for health, through maximizing our engagement and the leadership of affected communities, maximizing health equity and gender equality and human rights. So all of those elements that you would recognize from the previous strategy, but obviously somehow refined and strengthened in the current context. Obviously, underneath a critical, vital objective is to mobilize increased resources for health, for ending AIDS, TB, and malaria, and the other objectives that are outlined there. And then there is an additional, what is called an evolving objective to contribute to pandemic preparedness and response. And that's part, obviously, of the current context and the evolving conversation in that space, and in making sure that not only the Global Fund can contribute to that, as we've been doing, but also to make sure that any design in terms of pandemic preparedness and response includes AIDS, TB, and malaria at its very core, and that we avoid sort of having parallel tracks, which might sometimes be a risk. And then partnership enablers, I'm not going to describe that in details, but I hope that gives you a sense of where the board is heading. So hopefully, very helpfully, yesterday we got consensus on this framework, but as I said, there is a lot more work needed to further refine those objectives and make sure that the partnership is comfortable with moving all of those elements forward. And I hope the other thing that you can see through it is that it's quite an ambitious agenda in a quite challenging context, and there is a high level of ambition, I think, across the partnership, but also across our board. So I'll stop here on the strategy, and perhaps we can come back to that if you wish. And move into the next part. I'm going to try and give you a quick update on C19RM. So that's our response to the COVID-19 pandemic this year. I'll go quickly, but obviously it's linked to the 7th Replenishment campaign, because this is the context we find ourselves in. This is the role that the Global Fund is currently playing in that space, and the way by which we try to mitigate the impact of C19 on AIDS, TB, and malaria, and making sure that any global response to C19 incorporates, as I said, AIDS, TB, and malaria. So next slide, please. And I'll go quick on those ones. So you may have seen the report that we published, I think it was a couple of months ago now, on how COVID-19 is indeed disrupting health systems and health service delivery for AIDS, TB, and malaria. The report was focusing on Africa and Asia, and I refer you to it if you haven't seen it yet, because it's actually quite striking to see the evidence across more than 500 health facilities of how HIV testing, TB referrals, malaria diagnosis, all of those elements have failed dramatically at the end of 2020 compared to the previous same period in 2019. So we know that the impact is quite dramatic, and we need to obviously ensure that it is mitigated and as much as possible. We've also seen through this survey that the level of equipment in health facilities in terms of protective equipment for health workers or diagnostic capacities was very, very low. So huge gaps and challenges there as well. Next slide. So at the back of that, our board has, so as you know, last year we deployed nearly $1 billion to fight COVID-19, but also bolster health systems and mitigate COVID-19 impact on AIDS, TB, and malaria programs. And you can see here how it's been deployed. So that's the 2020 C19RM mechanism, focusing on testings, on PPEs, but also on adaptation of HIV, TB, and malaria programs across more than 100 countries. So this year, next slide, please, the Global Fund Board has decided to enhance and extend this C19RM, so this mechanism, to ensure that it would allow the Global Fund to continue supporting countries in need along the same lines, meaning to respond to COVID-19, but also making sure that they were supported to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on AIDS, TB, and malaria programs. And at this point in time, following the announcements from the US, but also Germany and the Netherlands, we have raised almost $3.7 billion for this mechanism that we are currently rolling out to countries. Next slide, please. I'll probably go fast on this, otherwise we won't have time enough for the 7th replenishment planning. So perhaps I'll go to the next slide. Yeah, so that gives you a sense of where we are at the moment. So there is a lot of submissions. A lot of submissions are already coming from countries for the C19RM 2021 mechanism. We have already received a bunch of both fast track and full funding requests. A few have been awarded. I'll mention that in a second. And you can see here how it is playing out. Windows are open until the end of the month, and the deadline to award funds is March next year. Yes, we can do that. Next slide, please. So this is the status as of today. Actually, I was on the board call that with Peter just a few minutes ago, and provided that update. At this point in time, a little bit more than 500 million in funding has been awarded so far. And the pipeline is really looking full, both in terms of what we call fast track requests, which are mainly focused on C19 tools, and full funding requests that are much more comprehensive in terms of their scope. So much more to come in the coming weeks, but that's a good progress already, as you can see. Next slide, please. Yeah, and these are a little bit the details around how those awards are allocated across products. So a couple of things perhaps to mention here. We've seen a lot of requests for oxygen in the first few weeks. It was very much influenced by the large funding requests from India, a few weeks ago when it was really in the middle of the crisis. Now we see much more demand coming for diagnostics and PPE. So the demand is becoming a little bit more comprehensive as we go through the funding requests. Okay, so that's on C19. There is much more to say. I'm happy to answer any question, but also I refer you to our website where you will find a lot of very updated information in terms of the mechanism and the awards and how it is all unfolding in countries. So this year, it's also the time for us to mark our 20th anniversary as a Global Fund partnership. And really the idea here is not only to market and sort of celebrate the 20 years of achievement, bring those lessons to the forefront as the world is facing a new pandemic with COVID-19, but also really to use this 20th anniversary campaign as a springboard, as a preparation for the 7th replenishment, right? So it's a way for the Global Fund to really engage across all of its stakeholders and partners and making sure that it is visible and relevant and present everywhere where global health matters are discussed over the next few months as we finalize the strategy and prepare for the 7th. So that's quite handy to have our 20th anniversary this year, actually, to be able to do that. Next slide, please. So you will have seen perhaps, so we have refreshed our brand to make sure that the 20th anniversary will look different, feel different, be much more dynamic, much more agile, more sort of digitally friendly. And with this refreshed brand, this is how we are marking the 20 years of impact. We were lucky enough to have a strong expression of support from all corners. Perhaps you can show the next slide, Tara. Oh, that's the next one, actually. Perhaps we'll come back to that in a second. So next. So when we launched the 20th anniversary campaign, we asked a few, and we are continuing to ask a few global leaders to share with us some messages of support. And we were very, very lucky to receive already a bunch of those messages. They are all online on our website and on social media. So we had the UN Secretary General, Dr. Tedros, Deputy Secretary General, and many more that are coming. Which is really, really great to kind of, bring all the family together. We have also, of course, a lot of testimonies and messages coming from frontline heroes as well, and we'll continue to promote those in the coming weeks and months. And then just perhaps the previous slide, sorry, Tara. So we are also promoting and preparing for a social media activation, where we have invited all of you and everyone around the world to really share with us an object that tell a story, that tell personal experience, personal moments of everyone's commitment in the fight against HPV and malaria. So we have already received quite a few of those, and we continue to collect them as a way to really share personal experiences and make that part of the campaign moving forward. So this is open for participation. Obviously, we are continuing to promote that as a way to share personal stories and the way we are all connected to the Global Fund. Yeah, and this is the timeline. So we launched the 20th anniversary last week, was it? Yes, I think so. At the back of the UN high-level meeting on HIV and also the G7 summit. So it was really kind of an intense period where we really wanted to make sure that the Global Fund was visible and our achievements. And then we are going to continue engaging on social media through the different initiatives that I've mentioned. And preparing for presence at the UNGA and following big events as we always do. And all of that is the way to prepare, as I said before, the 7th Replenishment campaign to be launched early 2022. So I think I'll stop here and hand over to Diane for the next part, if I'm not mistaken. The next slide, yes, indeed. So I hope that was helpful as a context and the key building blocks. And now into the 7th. Diane, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Françoise. And indeed, I think you can all see how all of these different elements move towards the campaign that we'll be starting for the 7th Replenishment very soon. So yes, why don't you go to the next slide, please? So part of the connective tissue, if you like, that we're trying to do with all of our main stakeholders and the sort of advocacy positions with key moments leading up to the 7th Replenishment is to make the connection between the current COVID crisis, the achievements of the fund over the last 20 years, and the challenges that face us going forward in terms of keeping AIDS, TB, and malaria on the agenda. And so what we've been doing with G7 and G20 processes this year is very much leaning into that in the ways that Françoise has described as well, to ensure that we make our fight relevant to the current moment. So talking about how the response to AIDS, TB, and malaria has been the backbone of the response to COVID-19 in many countries, how having an integrated approach to pandemic preparedness and response that includes things like the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria, so things that are currently killing people in the poorest countries in the world, is part of the fight against current and future pandemics. Looking at sustainability and as we build back better, taking into account the unfinished business of the Sustainable Development Goals, focusing on our core values and so on. And particularly pushing heavily on equity issues in the partnership. So next slide, please. So we've worked hard on pushing those messages out, and we're seeing some success in the current sort of international environment, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, is extremely challenging. And Katie pointed to the fact that we're going to have our hands full with the next replenishment campaign. And I think we are seeing at least some attention to our concerns. So you will be aware that at the World Health Assembly already this year, there was a lot of discussion on pandemic preparedness and a possible pandemic treaty. They did pass a resolution on increasing efforts against malaria and a focus on the care of health workers and the health workforce. In the Global Health Summit, there was reference to the Global Fund and our work on the ACT Accelerator in collaborating on ensuring equity of access to treatments for COVID-19. And noticing the importance of extending the mandate of that partnership work together on COVID-19 through the rest of the year. At the high-level meeting on HIV/AIDS, there were references to the 20th anniversary of the Global Fund and our creation with our roots in the high-level meeting on HIV in 2001, and references to the work that we do in responding to HIV and focusing on increasing commitments and financing for HIV. And in the G7, we also managed to get a reference to the Global Fund as part of the sort of partnership delivering life-saving supplies to countries. Next slide, please. In the upcoming processes, sorry, Tara, next slide. Yeah. In the upcoming processes in the second half of the year, we're hoping to increase this visibility. So we'll have our results report coming out in September. There are early indications that the COVID-19 disruption and our response to C-19 will be sort of key elements of that report. Many of you have been following our reports on the disruption over the last 18 months, and we are very worried that this will now begin to show in the impact in outcomes in countries. So that's going to be a key moment in September as we move into the UN General Assembly. We want to celebrate our 20th anniversary there and then work for more and stronger language in the G20 declaration on support for the Global Fund and the integration of continued work on the 3 diseases with any ongoing work for COVID-19, because we're very worried that a lot of the future-looking discussions in the global community are focused only on new theoretical threats and aren't taking into account the fact that we have existing challenges in countries that are still costing people lives. And then, as usual, we have World AIDS Day at the end of the year, which is a great moment for us to really ramp up the visibility and focus on AIDS in preparing for the campaign. So next slide, please. So Françoise has already mentioned the extremely compressed timeline that we have for producing the investment case. And I think there are a lot of things that are iterating together. So I just gave you an outline of sort of the context of the international environment that we're operating in and the challenges around those sort of attention deficits, shall we say, that we're facing. So the continued implementation of the COVID-19 response mechanism will happen in parallel to the development of the modeling for the investment case. So all of these things are sort of mutually informing each other, as well as Françoise has explained, the strategy development. So all of these things are sort of happening at the same time. And I think what we've done at the moment with the investment case is to begin the very in-depth technical modeling. As you'll be aware, there's a new strategy from UNAIDS and a new strategy for malaria, and we await the new calculation of the needs for TB. But all of those are our primary elements for the development of the investment case. And early indications, again, show that the needs have only grown, right? We are not, to use our joint language, we are not on track right now for the 2030 results, so targets rather. So there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done on that. We're also looking at the impact that COVID has had on health systems and on health workers. We know that we've lost nearly 200,000 health workers across sub-Saharan Africa already to COVID-19. That will likely have a huge impact on the ability to continue to deliver in countries. So we have to pay attention to that. And look at other strengthening activities we have to take. For example, we know that all the work that we've been doing for laboratory strengthening has been pivoted to use for COVID-19. All those gene expert machines are doing PCR tests for COVID-19 and not TB testing. And TB testing has fallen across the board. So what are we going to do to address that and strengthen those systems going forward? So those are some of the key elements that you'll be familiar with that are going into the investment case, and then we'll have to integrate the strategy as it evolves and any additional elements. Next slide, please. So what that looks like in terms of the investment case is, well, the modeling group is well underway. We're building on those global plans, as I mentioned. The resource needs are looking like a significant increase, right? Which will be a surprise to none of you. And then we are looking at some additional elements that might need to be integrated into the investment case in a way that hasn't been done before. So one is, what is the return on investment on the 3 diseases? There was a lot of discussion at the modeling guidance group on this to make this analysis more sophisticated and to have a sort of more robust return on investment discussion for our work on AIDS, TB, and malaria. We want to look particularly at the impact of inequality in health on the outcomes of the investment case. So again, a surprise to none of you that inequity has only grown over the last period, and especially since the hit of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we need to look at what the real impact is on that and how we can look at addressing that. Then I mentioned a little bit some of the examples of issues around health system strengthening. So how can we make sure that we can measure the impact of those investments over time and be able to report more robustly on what we're being able to achieve in relation to health systems? And then there's the outstanding issue of these pandemic preparedness elements and what the resource needs might be for what we're kind of almost optimistically calling the COVID tail, right? Assuming that there will be a diminution of the COVID pandemic. But obviously, none of us really knows what's happening. There's variants of concern that we should be very worried about. And it may not be that COVID is completely off the agenda by 2023, by the time we start implementing this new round. So there's a lot of discussion going back and forth on that and how we can embed those investments in the response to AIDS, TB, and malaria. Next slide, please. So all of that will come together in our investment case. And what we haven't addressed today, and what I want to flag, because this will be, Katie, some of the things that we're going to pick up with in the third quarter, are big elements around what our advocacy campaign will look like. I mean, right now, our advocacy campaign between now and the end of the year, as Francoise explained, is going to be this 20th anniversary push. I think all of our key messaging is very much in there, and it'll support our push for the 7th replenishment. So that's our on-ramp, if you like, to what will be the campaign for next year. And of course, our sort of communications and the opportunities for supporting campaigns around that. We'll be able to discuss all of that in the second half of the year. But what we wanted you to be aware of is that the hard work, as you know, of doing all the modeling and getting to the numbers is already well underway. And yes, Sam, of course, the modeling groups are looking at domestic financing issues. And of course, there's a big piece of work that has to be done there of the impact of the economic slowdown and the impact of COVID-19 on many local economies. Francoise mentioned that as well. So what is that going to look like? And what is the results also of our current co-financing? So our early indications from the Secretariat's point of view is that the co-financing expectations that we had for the 6th replenishment have been signed into the grants. So our expectations are on track that countries will meet their commitments for their co-financing for the 6th replenishment. Whether that plays out in real time over the next 2 years, of course, we have to see. But so far, countries are committing to making those commitments. So again, that'll be an element that we will tease out in the next 6 months. And I think our request from a sort of a ongoing fundraising and advocacy point of view, and to ensure our pledge conversion and all of these things, is for us all to lean into this 20th anniversary storyline, which is really so rooted in the Global Fund origin story, which is that there was a massive global problem. People were dying at unprecedented rates. The poorest people and the most vulnerable people in the world were dying, and the world came together and did something about it. That is the roots of the Global Fund story. And so we need to embrace that spirit again as we move forward now. The world needs to come together again. We need to address the needs of the most vulnerable and address these inequalities that are only expanding. And the Global Fund is one of the instruments that the global community created. We created this partnership together to do exactly that. And we need to continue the work because we're not finished. So that's kind of our messaging for the next 6 months as we behind the scenes work on the more robust things around a target and a campaign to reach that target. And there's another piece, Sam, you raised the domestic resource issue, but of course the big elephant in the room that we haven't addressed in this presentation, but no doubt you will ask me about in the second half of the year, is where's the money going to come from? And that is a big piece of conversation we all have to have, of course, in relation to ODA pressure. But let's table that for a future discussion. So let me leave it there. Thank you, Katie.
Great. And is there anybody else from the Secretariat? Linda, I see your mic unmuted. Did you want to jump in with any quick thoughts, or is that just a weird function of Zoom?
No. I didn't want to add anything,
Okay.
But I must say something. Of course, like you have said at the beginning, Katie, that this is a time where we need to look at strategically how do we mobilize ourselves, how do we position the Global Fund. We have lost many lives already when it comes to HIV, TB, and malaria. We lost more lives with COVID-19 because countries were not prepared. So we need to look at how do we work with that? How do we support each other to mobilize resources and not take away resources from HIV, TB, and malaria when we are focusing on COVID-19? However, look at how we support our communities, because we have seen what has happened globally in terms of even access to vaccine. It is a reputation of what has happened in HIV. So I think, again, we have an opportunity right now. We have a new rebranding of the Global Fund, which is a really great opportunity. We have an opportunity in terms of telling a great story around the 20th anniversary and the impact in our lives. And how do we utilize that going forward in terms of getting the resources that are needed for the replenishment? Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Linda, and thanks, Françoise and Diane, for those updates. And I will just, we have had people sort of joining, and I don't know about anybody else, but I actually got booted off at one point or accidentally booted myself off. But the presentation will be shared up on our website with the recording from today's call. So you will be able to review some of those slides. But I did just want to open it up to questions or comments at this stage. So if you can, please use the raise hand function that you should be able to find under, if you click on the participants at the bottom. And I think, or just put it into the, just sort of put it into the chat box there. And I'll try to manage that. So please do go ahead and use the raise hand or the chat for any questions or comments. Niluka, you win the, like, I don't know what the prize is for, like, quick hand draw. So you go ahead, and others, please put your hands up and I'll be watching that in the chat.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, Françoise and Diane, for taking us through all that. Just a quick question. In the last investment case, it said that 14 billion would spur, if I'm not wrong, 46 billion domestic investments. I think, so I just wanted to check with you, like, how would this be reflected in the new investment case? Because I think, if we can show, as you said, like the origin story of the Global Fund as one of those really important messages that we need to take forward in terms of the 20th anniversary and the 7th replenishment, the message on how Global Fund has spurred domestic investment through the previous replenishment would be a really good advocacy message for us as well in our advocacy for the 7th replenishment. So wanted to check with you how this would be done, how this would be reflected in the upcoming investment case for the Global Fund. Thanks.
And I'm not seeing anybody else with a hand up right now, so maybe I can just ask a quick question and get your reflections on it. But the results report, which traditionally, which you mentioned would be, out in September, usually it's just a little ahead of the UNGA. Will it be following sort of a similar format as it has in other years, where where it is exactly as it sounds, a results report, or is there going to be some early indications in there in terms of the messaging around the investment case, the domestic resource mobilization sort of issues and the impact on them? And if so, I'm just wondering if we can have sort of a conversation about how perhaps as GFAN members, we can connect before that report is released so that we can be prepared for if there are those early indications of the impact of COVID, the impact either on the delivery of programs and or sort of domestic resource mobilization, if we can, sort of have some conversations ahead of time, ahead of that release, so that we're prepared for the messaging that's in there, because those are the kinds of challenging those are the kinds of challenges that can throw wrenches into conversations with different donor governments, for example, and with implementing governments as well. So I'm just wondering around that results report, if you have more of an idea around timing, and if we can, and what more specifically will be in there, and if we can keep in touch on that so that we can make sure to work with you ahead of time around getting out any tough messaging and what the methodology or what the rationale is behind that. I don't know if that makes sense, but maybe if we could pass it back to you, Diane and Francoise, for quick answers, and encourage others again to raise their hands or use the chat if they have questions or comments.
Thank you. I'll have a go, and Diane, I'm sure you will step in. So on domestic resource mobilization, it's obviously a very key topic for the future investment case. So you may have heard that recently the Global Fund Secretariat has seen the establishment of the Health Financing Department. And this new department is precisely meant to respond to the changing context on that front, and the need for the Global Fund to really be on top of those issues with an expert team to be able to inform the investment case, obviously, and the work more broadly moving forward. So we will be developing the investment case in close collaboration with that team. They're already looking at initial indications in terms of how the COVID-19 pandemic is impacting fiscal space in implementing countries, and therefore the likely impact on health financing more broadly, and how we might therefore project domestic resource mobilization for the investment case. So at this point in time, these are more initial indicators rather than hard data, but obviously this is progressing. We expect domestic resource mobilization to be affected, obviously, to become more challenging in the coming period. But as you said, we need to continue pushing that and leveraging the fact that we've been able to leverage and strengthen resource commitments from implementing countries in the past decades, and we need to continue doing that, but recognizing that fiscal space is going to be affected in the future. So yes, it will be there, but probably in a sort of different way given the COVID-19 impact. To your question, Katie, so the results report is obviously a key product of a key milestone in this sort of journey towards the 7th replenishment. It's meant to do multiple things, right? Because it's going to have the refreshed brand. It's going to be the results report of the year of the 20th anniversary. So in terms of it's going to be a key communication product and advocacy product. It is supposed to give the results achieved in 2020 on 8 TBM LIA, and we always have issues in terms of the data on 8 TBM LIA. By the time we produce the report, it's going to be even more the case this year. And on top of that, we will obviously talk about C19, the way it has impacted 8 TBM LIA and our response. And obviously it's going to be then sort of one of the advocacy tools we will be using as part of the 7th replenishment campaign. So it does a lot of things. In terms of the format, we will probably keep continuity because it is at the end of the day a result report. So it's not the investment case. We cannot really preempt that. We won't have the strategy yet as approved by the board. So it will be really focused on results on the 3 diseases, health system strengthening, and COVID to the largest possible extent. And what we will probably do, we are looking at that actually this week, is think about, because it's going to be digitally based, essentially, given that we all live in this virtual world now, to think about the possibility for the results report to be updated on the website when we get further data on Malaya and later in the year. So the format might become a little bit more interactive and evolving to reflect the volatile nature of the data we are capturing. But that remains to be seen. We are checking with designers and all of that how to do that. And to your point in terms of getting prepared on the messaging, yes, surely that's an opportunity for us to engage with you and see how we push that forward in the context of UNGA and the subsequent period. I hope I have answered, but Diane, please step in.
I think you covered it all, Françoise. I think that's it.
Okay, thanks. I'm seeing very quiet people on the line today, but a lot of people. And so I just wanted to make sure if anybody's having difficulty finding the raise hand. I see, oh, Pauline has a question. Oh, good. Oh, you're on mute, Pauline. It somehow came on.
Sorry, not a question, but just to complete the remarks. And I well placed to know it's an issue that is really at heart for many advocates. But with the launch of the results report, just to reiterate that with the good practice that we have established over the last few years about doing our most to share some elements so that so that partners in the different countries and capitals are well equipped at the moment of the launch. So to tell you exactly how long, how many days or in advance we can share, but do our most to share in advance some elements or an embargoed copy and potentially also to have a call. We'll see closer to the launch what we can do, but we keep this very important element in mind.
Thanks, Pauline. I appreciate it. Thanks, I appreciate it. Any other questions or comments from folks on the line? I think there's a lot of really good information and kind of just a first look at everything. And so really appreciate that. And I'm seeing James from Stop AIDS in the UK. So James, we'll go over to you and then encourage anybody else to raise your hand. Otherwise, we have a few just wrap up announcements and sort of other announcements, and we'll do that and then wrap up the call. But James, over to you.
Great, thank you, Katie. For those who don't know me, my name's James. I'm Stop AIDS Senior Advocacy Advisor. This is the first global fund replenishment I'm actively working on. So looking forward to working with you all more closely in the year ahead, and really value today's presentation as well. I was wondering, Francois or Diane, you could comment a bit more about plans for publication of the Global Fund strategy. So what key moment has been released, and how this kind of feeding into the advocacy plans as well. So will this be around World AIDS Day or a separate release for planning for it with the board?
And I'll pass it back to you, Françoise. Go ahead.
Yes, that's an excellent question. I don't think we have a clear answer to it yet. So we know when the board is expected to approve it by its meeting in November, so surely not before that. But then in terms of the publication and communication plan in the following days and weeks, we haven't worked that out yet. But what we do know is that we cannot afford to wait too long, because then we are launching the investment case at the back of it. So no clear plan yet, unless, Diane, you have discussed anything on your side with the team on that.
No, but just to say that my understanding, and Françoise, sorry, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the publication of the strategy will be at a very high level. So it won't be that there is another big document that comes out other than what the board approves. So there'll be a sort of the framework and the narrative that will have been iterated several times by committees, approved in November, and then we will tidy it up and make it look pretty, but that will be all it says. And then the investment case is sort of embeds that and makes the pitch for the financing. So it's not like, I mean, it's an important moment, and you're right, it's an important advocacy moment, but it's not a it won't be here's something new, because not certainly for our circle, maybe for the world, but for our sort of global fund partnership, it will be a document that we've been working on for sort of 6 months, and we're not going to write some new version of that. It will probably be a quite a light document, I would say, that sticks to what is approved. But maybe I take the opportunity, if I may, Katie, to just say, I think one of the things that we will all need to work on collectively, I mean, on the one hand, we're super excited about the energy of the 20th anniversary, the new brand, the way the partnership has come together to deal with COVID. There's a lot of really good news stories around what we're doing right now. But you are the group that works with us most closely on getting to the great target number, right? And you often push us to have an even bigger target than we think we can manage. It's going to be a very, very heavy lift for all of us next year. And so we will start reaching out to everybody in the second half of this year for good intelligence, for advice, for understanding of what's happening in all of our different countries. And start to look at how we can drive a solution on that. And then maybe to address Peter's question, if I just carry on, Katie, we're actively working on that right now. I can't really share, as you know, those host negotiations are a little sensitive. But as soon as we need your support to kind of come in cheering, we hope, we will let you know. I took note of Katie's point at the beginning that I think we all agreed that having an implementing country and a donor hosting our prep meeting was very successful last time. We would look at that as well. It's probably late January, February of 2022, so probably still hybrid type events. Not sure if people are going to be traveling internationally. It's a whole new world for us. So we do need to look carefully at the implications of that and what that means, especially if we want to host a virtual meeting. Connectivity is really important. So again, we'll probably come back to you all for advice once we're a bit further along on that. But let's just say that the challenge that we have on the financing side about where this money is going to be found is informing very much how we push for who will host, because we will need the energy that President Macron brought to our 6th replenishment. We will need it on steroids to get the target for the 7th replenishment. So we're looking for that, leadership. Unfortunately, President Macron is going to be in the middle of an election. Otherwise, we might indeed go back and ask him to do it again. But the push will be for leadership of that sort of financial weight, shall we say? I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Well, Peter's done everything but post like a little picture of the stars and stripes there to indicate his preference. So, so there you have it. Thanks very much for all of that. And I guess, just as we're trying to wrap up here a minute before the hour, just to say that, this is the first of many conversations, and we really hope that people are able to join on a regular basis and participate in the discussions. We do try to have more discussions and less sort of presentations, but obviously for this sort of first kickoff and at various points in time, we do sort of have these kinds of more presentations and take it back to your organizations, take it back to your networks and have those conversations. And hopefully by the time we come back in September, we'll start to be able to frame some discussions around some of these key sort of issue areas, challenge areas, and around sort of these key events and milestones. So thank you very much to our colleagues at the Secretariat for making themselves available today and preparing this first of many 7th replenishment presentations with GFAN. We appreciate it. Tara is just pointing into the chat, just for anybody who may have missed it, GFAN finally does have a new home, and we are hosted with the Jublanga Institute in the Netherlands, and we're actually quite pleased about it and released a little bit of an announcement mid to late last week about it. I don't know if anybody else had anything urgent that they wanted to make an announcement about, but from our our end, I think that was it, as well as, sorry, there was something else. Oh yeah, we had a job posting that closed on Monday, and we were really excited to receive a large number of really qualified applications. So we're really hoping that we'll have a colleague that's joining us on these calls and with all of you and supporting all of you on board in the next month or so. So stay tuned for that. Any other announcements that anybody wanted to make quickly at the end of the call? No? Okay, so I'll just close with a congratulations to all who worked around the G7. There were some really important conversations that took place there, and also to those colleagues who are busy working away around the G20, also a number of interesting developments lately. So congratulations to all of you who've been doing that work. Thank you. We'll be keeping in touch over the summer. Please consider joining the working group that will be striking for GFAN to support coming up with our sort of GFAN ask around the replenishment, and look forward to continuing these conversations with all of you. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of your days. Good luck. Take care.
Thank you, KG. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.